Hello and welcome. I'm Becky with Malvern Books, and we're thrilled to be with you this afternoon for a celebration of Rachel Genn's newest novel, What You Could Have Won, from And Other Stories. In addition to Rachel, Kate Smith will join us as our host, and we'll be in discussion with Rachel as well. If you have any questions for them, please do put them in the chat box. Rachel Genn is a neuroscientist, artist, and writer who has written two novels, The Cure, which came out in 2011, and What You Could Have Won. She was a Leverhulme Artist-in-Residence in 2016, and she has written for Granta, 3M Magazine, and Hotel. She is currently working on Hurtling, a hybrid collection of essays about the neuroscience, art, and abjection of artistic reverie, as well as a collection of nonfiction about fighting an addiction to regret. Genn works at the Manchester School and the School of Digital Arts, both at Manchester Metropolitan University, and she lives in Sheffield. She joins us from there. Also, Kate Smith is a writer of fiction and comedy, and she's a writer and performer. Her first novel, The Negligents, was published by Valley Press in 2018. She was a semi-finalist in the BBC's So You'd Think You're Funny Awards, and her short sketch reached the final of the Chorts Writer Performer Awards, screened at the Bill Murray Pub in Islington. I hope I have that right. Kate was also a finalist in the BBC Search for a New Radio Voice and was shortlisted for Radio 5's new podcast competition. With Rachel, Kate wrote Pick Me, a Black comedy about the adoption process, which was developed by Dan Patterson. They're currently working together on comedy for radio and TV. Oops, I just clicked the wrong button. Okay, Kate, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, can I just say this is a bit of a dream gig for me? I was thinking about this earlier. I get to ask my friend questions about her book, which I love and which I've seen evolve over the years. So this is just perfect. So I met, I call Rachel Len, by the way, for reasons perhaps outside the ambit of this chat, but this is, when I say Len, I mean Rachel. So I met Len when I was doing a master's course in creative writing, and years ago, and Len was actually one of the tutors. It was an online master's, so we didn't meet each other until some time after that, but I kind of loved her pretty much straight away, and I never get to tell her this, so I'm going to sort of tell her this without looking at her. So she makes me laugh. She makes me cry laughing, and I didn't think that happened after you left school. So that is just a fantastic, a fantastic feature of her. And she's brave. You can see it in her writing, which I think is fearless, but also she lives that way too. She never kind of genuflects to the establishment. She's sort of a woman sticking it to the man, and I love that. And also, you are a powerful force to have in one's corner, and I feel really privileged to say you're my friend. So
is it okay if I start crying now?
Yes, everyone? Of course.
Be a nice start,
that's the end. We don't need to discuss the actual book.
Thank you, Ken. That's very, very lovely. I call Kate Ken. I'm sorry to drag this here to this, but I call her Ken, and if I start trying to say Kate, it'll go wrong. So we're going to have to go with Ken.
Exactly. It's exactly what I thought. So, yeah, on that note, I'm going to kick off with a question. It has to be the first question, I think, and it's a two-parter. Can you tell us, what is this book about? And did it turn out how you wanted it to?
Ooh, they're biggies, Ken, to start with.
I know, aren't they?
This book is about, the elevator pitch is, this book is about a psychiatrist who is failing, and he wants to revive his failing career by turning his singer in ascendance girlfriend into a drug experiment. That's the simplest form. For anyone who's read the book, the form of it, the structure of it is not so simple. The question, did it turn out how I wanted to? Over 8 years of writing it, it went through many different shapes and incarnations, many to do with the way in which I felt I could properly get at the relationship. And I said to you the other day, Ken, about the little review, I think it was the Kirkus review, which describes the book as a cubist portrait of the relationship because of the way that the stories intersect and cross over each other. And to me, that was just like a complete boon. It was like being understood by a long misunderstanding doctor. It felt like a diagnosis. And I was just like, yes, that's what I meant to do. I told you that. I had no idea that that's what I was trying to do, but actually that is exactly what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to, I want to say work out, but none of this was ever in the forefront of my mind, as you know, as we have discussed many times over it coming to its final form.
Yeah.
But it was something that I just had to kind of trust to the test and shake things up, allow them to settle, but not knowing that I wasn't always going to be able to settle for that settling. And I was going to probably have to shake things up again.
Yeah.
But the reason I talk about agitating it is that I honestly wanted, I realize now, all of these things are retrospective. I wanted to have something that was in motion. I wanted to have something that was actually mobile. And I didn't want the writing to close down the possibilities of that.
Yeah. I'd really like to talk about the structure a bit later and the point of view and other things. But in terms of a kind of, did it turn out how you wanted it to? I love the thought of other people having a view afterwards and then thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I meant, although I didn't know that at the time. And that's exactly how it is.
And I think a lot of the time, as you will know too, writing, you are trusting to there being a destination that you're going to get to that you can't see.
Yeah.
But another friend, Amanda, she describes it as like long distance swimming, not even being able to see the other side, not really getting much enjoyment out of actually doing it, but still having to go for it.
And being jellied up.
It struck me the other day, doing all these tests and trying out different points of view and stuff. I know we will talk about that later, but it felt like I was at the opticians, is this better or that better? Is this better or that better?
Yeah.
Except for I didn't know what the alphabet was either. I'd never learned it. So it's really about being able to be uncertain and dissatisfied for long periods of time.
Yeah.
As usual, I'm really selling the writing process.
Now everyone wants to write a novel. Okay, so the title, What You Could Have Won, is, and here's that for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'm sure you all have, there it is. What You Could Have Won. It's a perfect title for a regret-obsessed writer. Can you talk a bit about regret, why it matters to you, perhaps bring in a bit about your neuroscience background? I know we've touched on that, and how regret kind of manifests itself in this book.
Yeah, I've been interested in regret, it turns out, all my life, but I was speaking to a documentary producer at a festival in Sheffield a few years ago, and it struck me that I have more of a dirty relationship with regret than I like to believe I have. She was saying, so what's the obsession with regret, blah, 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 blah. And there I started just trying to intellectualize it straight away, because I did my PhD on brain controls of wanting versus liking. And when you want something that you no longer like, the upshot is very often regret. And so that was one of the reasons. It was kind of like a byproduct of my research to be interested in it. And so I started telling her this. And then I realized that actually, no, the power and the worrying around the subject, the not being able to leave it alone, cannot come from just intellectualizing about it. It was all about regretful experiences in my life, often to do with violent acts and I think George Saunders, calls regrets failures of kindness. And it was those that where I could have done something nicer and I didn't, that really kind of like would not let me go. So yeah, I began to always metaphors drag me into things, drag my interest into things. And for this particular emotion, regret, there's a fantastic Dostoevsky quote, which is, I can't remember, which is, it's about the kind of like delicious badness, the damnable sweetness of the feeling of regret. Something that you can go towards as well as be put off by. And it was that like dual nature, this kind of like alternator feature of regret that I became obsessed by. Yeah. And how we are very often not in control of what we say we like as much as we think we are.
Fantastic. And did you set out to have as a backdrop regret? Did you set out to think this character will kind of embody regret and this one won't? Or was it just a pervading sense that you need this to permeate the whole?
I think I wanted to go at it again as a subject and a theme. I wanted to go at it in many different ways.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be part of the research. I wanted it to be part of the story. I wanted the characters to have more or less awareness about how regretful they were about things.
Yeah.
I just felt like I didn't want a story about a goodie and a baddie.
Yeah.
I didn't want Henry to be the baddie and Astrid to be the goodie. I wanted them to really, I think a lot of the time I was writing this book to find out what kind of person I was. What did it mean to be a woman was one of the major forces behind writing this. And I just felt like having regret in there as a consequence and a driver for both their behaviors would be something that would power the narrative as a whole.
Yeah,
I felt like as well these examining regret at like the minute level, I didn't really want to do that. What I wanted to do was kind of do the research and then push it down under the narrative so that you could feel the strength of it there and the impetus there, but not with it fully in your face the whole time.
Yeah.
I guess that was one of the reasons why I made Henry live in a world of science, so that it was plausible for him to think about certain things in certain ways, but then to let his ego take over within that world as well.
Yeah.
So this is very much a story about ego in both their cases.
Mm. And again, I'd love to come back to that a bit later, the ego, and looking at both of them in a bit more detail. But before that, I wonder if it's sort of too early for a bit of a reading. I think it's never too early for a bit of a... So Silk Burns Quickly in the Desert, beautiful chapter name. And seeing as we're in Texas, seems kind of appropriate. So I'm wondering, can you talk a little about this chapter, just give it some context, and then if you'd read from it, that would be fantastic, please.
Yes, yeah. I have to admit that this is a very last minute name of this chapter. I think Tara will remember, because she pushed me on it, because the title they did have before, she didn't feel lived up to the chapter itself. And once she'd said that to me, neither did I. And I'd been, as is always the case, you're kind of like over fond of certain things, and it's kind of because you know they don't work.
Yeah.
Really. And so I really loved that title. And then as soon as Tara said it to me, I'm like, oh yeah, no. So yeah, it is a lovely title, but it didn't come into being until right at the very last minute. This chapter, Silk Burns Quickly in the Desert, it's set at Burning Man. It's the end of Astrid's countrywide tour. And she kind of has reached a peak of longing to be adored by Henry in a way that she would see fit. And it's kind of a pivotal point of the book. It's one of the very few places where she goes into first person rather than second person. And I hope that it indicates in a kind of subliminal way that she is finally having to face up to who she really is and what is going on with her relationship. Because of course, another theme running through the book is how much we can hide from ourselves about what is going on in a relationship. So this chapter is about her taking a drug that Henry has given to her to have at this particular night, where she thinks he's going to turn up, at an incredible sensual concert in the middle of the desert at Blackrock, and she's taken the drug and she's just coming up on it, as it were. And so it lasts for about 4 or 5 minutes. She's right on the edge of the stage, and she pulls her elasticated crotch further into a squat blue glitter cone. And when she lets it go this time, it spatters first, then puffs back. The elastic shivers back to her cunt. Do it again, just to watch it happen. A guitarist twangs. It feels the right thing. They shout what could be warnings, but just as correctly, they could be hopes and wishes. She looks back out at them as much as to say, did you see that? Dance for them. Dance again, that's what they want. The sun's going down on these people. The elastic can't stop it. And these people, who are a lot more people than she can see, are telling her to come here, over here, they say. No one tells her not to go. She can leave the stage. Lucian says no. But she knows her body can say she's going. She walks out into them, on top of them, and she stands on their hands and their heads and faces if their heads are back. Behold, they say with their necks, throats like snake bellies joined to make a path. Her steps are working like they do when she walks up the wall, and she moves forward and she don't go down. She escapes above them. Her heels are solid, cupped in palms, and she peels the jumpsuit from her body. She is bare to the waist and she leans forward because what they've been trying to tell her, that this must be the sea, because she has to be at the prow of their boat. Don't confuse her, some of them say with their arms. Put her to the floor and let her run through a trench of them in the dust. And they do this and they part, and she sees, she gets it, she's got it. That without them she can sprint fast and clean in bare feet, and she imagines the arm of that jumpsuit filling up with air and hinged stiff behind her. The sea is red and she's down with it. This heat makes her stay down, and the heads and shoulders are the roiling boil, and suddenly she's a stone in their soup. She clings to calves, heavy. Get her up. Her blue sleeves dangle, her chest is bare. She's no longer moving forward very fast. She's not cooler up here above them. Her legs are apart and they have her tight around the ankles, and she stands making a firm triangle of noise. The noise never flares up past her knees. It shoots towards the mountains from her crotch like a pussy laser. Is that where she left him? No one is telling her what to do, and she needs nothing. She looks down to see how some of them have only grown so far. That is so neat. Lucian is here with them, shouting, waving what he wants her to do, and she can hear him above the words that are coming up from the crowd she's walking on, but she turns on him because what there is to care about is not here in Blackrock, and the names that remain choke under these feet and the inescapable dust. She steps on some faces that say they're laughing, and faces that say they're upset, and faces that say they're surprised. A shoulder disappears as she steps on it, feel Jesus, and she drops down. And a man with a face that says, I'm sick, catches her and pushes her back up on top of the heads with his hands hooked under her crotch. His thumb in her ass, but for the elastic. He fully wipes his hand on her leg, and she thinks whoever this is happening to should be mad. But without despair or encouragement, she becomes free to go and go. It's obvious with any processes, coming, going. She sees hope and despair, but she doesn't know what to do with them, and so it doesn't matter. She's never been free before, and that makes this the place. It could not be anywhere else, and she could not be with anyone else. You guys, You guys make the floor come under her feet, and you walk with her and you touch her and you pull down her outfit and she steps out of it, and you lift her again and she sees a 3-story head between her and the mountains, and below it black ribs, and far through them the terracotta mountain gone grey. 2 hands hold and squeeze her tits, and there are whispers that there are fires. You've arrived. You part to show her. One fire is dead orange, flat, the kind of orange forever. Nothing holding her. She doesn't laugh, but she could do, if someone reminded her of how that's different from singing and talking. You shout to her over a low glowing mound. It's obvious that she must get to them. Her face gets touched and 2 hands hold her neck and her feet leave the floor. This is what she does. She hangs in your hands. About her, all this freedom. A face rubs round the scarf and breathes through it into her hair. An animal's face comes through. It's breaking hers and it won't be mended. Animal faces are easy, she tells everyone who can hear. And she walks in through the orange and it's all suddenly fall and give up. And she suddenly falls and gives up. Flames finally tell her what it was she wanted. Flames are good at telling her what she wants. That's easy. She can do that. She's not even in and you stop her. Someone comes through and pulls her up and out horribly. In a tin man's funnel hat, she sees that silk burns quick in the desert. And now I wish my heart was still in it because I'm on fire and the smell of my hair dashes from mountain to mountain. Don't fucking pull me out. People pat my head with planky hands. I get it as they pull me out, but I can't smoke. That's me. I'm not to own. Cold or hot, we won't do either. Regret and relief are once again the names of paint colours. My scarf stays in and burns for me. My hair crisps away to red dust, and I watch it clapped off in a stranger's hands. People scream, but they don't know what's happening. It's a hairpiece. I feel my crotch is hot and still wet when I'm out of the fucking words. I said words. I meant fire. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's muted except me, so I'm going to clap extra loudly so you can hear it. I like I said to you, that last line sometimes makes me cry, and I've read it
with boredom.
With boredom, no, not with boredom. When I read it, I find it kind of horrifying and moving, and that's obviously part of the point.
I think also, Ken, I just wanted to say that that's not really representative of the rest of the book.
No,
the rest of the book is kind of pretty dialogue heavy and very. There's a lot of very pacey, and this was a chance to actually live the transition of Astrid in this state. Yeah. And it was kind of a joy to write and to take up a different position as a writer, not thinking about what people want or what people, how people are manipulating each other, rather just to let her be for a bit.
Yeah. I think, well, apart from the fact that I just love those words, and I love that words and fire become mixed up. So, you know, it's as though the landscape has scorched her of her vocabulary, as well as, you know, it's a beautiful kind of and horrifying image. But also, as you mentioned earlier, it's a great way into a discussion about point of view, because most of the time Astrid is written in second person point of view, as you know, and then just in that final paragraph leaps into first person. And I think it's maybe the only time in the book that happens. So not only do we watch her, but we're kind of with her, burning with her. Yes. And I just find that extremely powerful.
Someone said last week, Matt Tribo, who did a review of the book, said that he found that second person for Astrid meant that he could immerse himself in her suffering more, and that her fate was much more uncertain throughout the book. Again, not something that I planned, but maybe something I felt I wanted from using that
Yeah.
point.
And I know that when you were writing it, because I remember having conversations with you about when to do that and whether to do that and how to do that. And I just thought it might be nice to bring in a story that does that we talked about at the time. And it's Jennifer Egan's story called Black Box, which you remember was a story published in Tweets back in about 2012. And all done in second person. I thought maybe we could have a look at that and then think about how that kind of the ripples of that feed into your book, if you think they do at all. So
go on, Ken, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say for people that don't remember this, it's sort of called science fiction, although that makes me kind of squirm, but it's really good. And it's sort of Jennifer Egan's story, Black Box, is set in a futuristic world, but not that futuristic. It's only about 2030, and it's sort of world of citizen espionage. And the story, released in Tweets, 140 characters, which was the limit back then, I think. It reads like a kind of instruction manual for women on how to protect themselves and also how to extract information from dangerous men who also happen to be terrorists from whom they need to extract information. And I thought I might just, the paragraphs are really short, and I might just read two of them, and then we can think about how that sort of fits in. So this is paragraph 1, and they're just numbered 1 to however many. So paragraph 1 says, people rarely look the way you expect them to, even when you've seen pictures. The first 30 seconds in a person's presence are the most important. If you're having trouble perceiving and projecting, focus on projecting. Necessary ingredients for a successful projection: giggles, bare legs, shyness. The goal is to be both irresistible and invisible. When you succeed, a certain sharpness will go out of his eyes. In paragraph 4, when you know that a person is violent and ruthless, seems a pertinent paragraph to read, you will see violent ruthlessness in such basic things as his swim stroke. What are you doing? From your designated mate amid choppy waves after he has followed you into the sea may or may not betray suspicion. Your reply, swimming, may or may not be perceived as sarcasm. Shall we swim together toward those rocks? May or may not be a question. All that way will, if spoken correctly, sound ingenuous. Will have privacy there, may sound unexpectedly ominous. And I like that because it's second person, but also it reminds me of both of them, Henry and Astrid. So there's a second person that reminds me of Astrid. And then there's those kind of, he's got Henry's like argot about it, you know, he's scientific or pseudo-scientific, whatever they were, are irritating kind of aphorisms about this is how life is and this is what we do in response to that. And I just found that really interesting, and that you can play with that kind of second person, and that it fits so well in with what you were doing for both of them. I think
also what I've discovered retrospectively again is that Astrid's story is given in second person, perhaps because she believes she won't be believed. She's just I feel like to have a state for a character where she's not sure whether she's ready to tell the story yet, that's when second person seems perfect. It gives a kind of I don't want to say unsteadiness, I want to say kind of duality, in that you could the person is at once intimate with you and at arm's length at the same time. It's really, but I hope that it works well in this book, but it takes a lot to get it to work. I discovered. I think, but I hope it works.
I think it works really well in this book. That kind of out of body thing you're getting at, and it's interesting because that's how, you know, when people talk about traumatic events, they'll tend to do that too, won't they? They'll tend to kind of, in order to distance, you know, rather than saying I felt this, you know.
Yes, I think also contrasting with Henry as well, being in first person, he was always going to have I. He was,
Yeah,
his
yeah.
ego would not allow anything else. But also there was something really delectable about having someone with such little self-awareness. It kind of doubly fitted him.
Yeah.
Because he's absolutely unaware of how much of a twit he is.
Agreed. I love it.
And he Tara brought up something the other week about Henry being he doesn't, the way I hope I've constructed his point of view is he doesn't see that the world that he's trying so desperately to fit into is filled with all the paltriness that he feels he's above. And it's just, I wanted to have that contrast in there.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
Thank you, Ed.
Talking of violent and ruthless men, as they popped up in that reading there, let's talk about The Sopranos. Okay, when I first read this novel years ago, it wasn't a novel, it was a short story, and I think it was a short story called Box Set at the time, and it features in the finished book, although in a slightly different way, and it was about a relationship between a couple seen through the prism of the Sopranos. So in the beginning there was Astrid and Henry and the Sopranos, and someone asked you a question a while ago that, and I really like the question, so I'm going to ask the same one. The Sopranos is the kind of third protagonist in this novel. Is that the way you see the Sopranos? Why that, and what's its significance to this story as a whole?
When I wrote Box Set, I already in that short story started playing around with time and the push and pull of a relationship as it was being massaged by their interaction with this incredibly affecting drama. And I remember having the chapter, that it turned out to be a chapter, but I remember having the short story and thinking, this is a kind of like concertina version of something much bigger. And I just felt like watching The Sopranos and watching those kinds of male bully dominated dramas, I kept going back to them, and I wanted to think about how much of a choice I had in it. What was it that made me go back to them? How did Tony get into my life? What position did he take up? And how did I let that happen? And how do any of us let it happen? I said to Tara recently about the Ursula Le Guin idea of the hero story not being the only story. The kind of like stabbing, spear chucking, raping hero it's not our story, not all of our story. In fact, very few of our story. And it gets us to kind of like cower in our own lives. And I wanted to project the atmosphere of hiding out at home into the book. I'm sorry, I'm just going to tell the kids to be quiet. Can you be quiet, please? Sorry.
Is that the politest way you've ever done that in your life?
Really is. Sorry. They're screaming for some reason.
Of course they are.
So Tony Soprano and his skirt wearing as the therapist in Astrid's dreams kind of was very central to the whole book. They start watching it, and Astrid thinks that it's going to be kind of a band-aid box set that's going to solve all their problems. But actually, I can't concentrate because of them. Actually, it's because the manipulation that's going on between them both, mostly Henry to Astrid, I wanted that to kind of thread its way through the box set and come back. And I hope that's what's happened in the book. Hope they fit together. And whether they're a protagonist or not, you asked me if they were a third protagonist. I think it's more of a subtext. I think the Sopranos is something, and the violent atmosphere of that particular box set is something that would not be tamed and just kept coming up in this like two-hander, and I let it come up where it would.
Yeah.
I suppose I wanted it to be a bit of the subconscious of the book, really.
Yeah. A bit where Astrid's at the rehab clinic and Sinead, someone else at the clinic, when Sinead said you were only attracted to men who put you under threat, she had tugged the ripcord to the truth. Is kind of, there's a bit of Sopranos kind of threat going on.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a tiny bit here, Ken, that I would like to read.
Yeah, do please.
It's further on in the book where Astrid is introspecting really about what effects this had on her. It's a kind of a part of a chapter where she has a moment of clarity before things change irrevocably. And it's her considering what's happened with The Sopranos. You know now, The Sopranos had been the wrong backdrop. You should have chosen something less caustic, less intimate, shittier. The consistent pounding force of the stories bent you out of shape. Astonished that people could feel they were owed so much from life, you wanted it right along with them. Primed but never receiving, you were yoked to these dogs without getting any action. The end of an episode brought a flood of blame and lust and spite and cruelty after watching barrel-chested men raking through others' lives like thick rolls of barbed wire. How should you displace the discomfort of comparing the motives of these men with Henry's? Without breathing in, there was a suffocating strain of trying to give form to the vapors that seeped from TV baddies, but being careful not to taste what exactly it was that they would be satisfied with, conquered by. To stay alive in that atmosphere meant becoming a cloud that they could walk through, or a clump of drizzle, a bank of miserable cloud to bounce the massive fuselage, the bellies of their jets against. You started to blame those women on screen, witnessing the agony of someone who is unloved when they think they are loved, produced a pain that had to be transformed, leaving no room for pity. So, yeah,
great.
That's the most direct, I would say, direct interaction that Astrid has with the idea of The Sopranos in the whole book. The rest of it permeates in ways that are much more indirect.
Yeah. Can we talk about Henry, please?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about him a bit already, and you started by talking about the relationship between Henry and Astrid. But I want to kind of focus in on him in the way that we have with Astrid a little bit. So it's true he's a sociopath. Here's what we know. Okay, he's a sociopath. He can be charming. He's manipulative. He's possibly narcissistic. I also found him prudish in a way that I found funny. So I have tried nudity, but prefer to wear shorts. It's just, I love. He's mean-spirited. And I think the "and yet" is important. So two things. For Astrid, she says before she knew anything about Henry, his accent, his smell, quote, there was that declaration in his stare, the oath in it, I will make things easy again, is what she sees when she meets him.
Yeah.
And the other "and yet," from the first page, he's objectifying her. From the very first page, she's tent, face, teeth in, chattering teeth in face. We're kind of moving into her like that. Yet when he sees the handyman, Gigi, we see an entirely different Henry straight away, opening of the book. Yeah. So when Henry sees Gigi, there he is again, pulling himself from the sea, which makes me, this is him talking, makes me switch my eyes to the floor, though no one can see me from there. It's just a kind of shyness and a coyness and a vulnerability. And I love that kind of confusion there. You talked about avoiding goodies and baddies, and I think you have done that with Henry, although it's easy to,
I hope so.
Yeah, to label him as a baddie. How do you feel about him, and how did you feel about him as you were writing?
I kind of found it quite, I was worried really, because I found it quite cathartic to focalize through Henry.
Yeah.
It was very much terrible fun to do it, but it was also very difficult not to make him like over the top, and it was very difficult to make him to try to get over his vulnerability about not wanting to make himself vulnerable, not wanting to allow himself the openness that love involves. And I wanted to get him to the brink of almost being able to do that. I wanted us to see that he could very easily fall for Astrid, and because he knew that, he must put a stop to it. And I wanted that to be there, but barely there. So it's all about pace and tension and being able to shove things under the kind of the top layer of the narrative, so that people are aware without being explicitly aware of how frightening vulnerability was for Henry.
Yeah.
So it was quite difficult to do, but the science kind of backdrop allowed me to do that quite well, because he was being pushed and pulled at work, being used by his boss and unable to achieve what he wanted to achieve. And all of these things were things that were needling him outside the relationship, which I felt were important to explain his actions and intentions within the relationship.
There's a part in there somewhere where Astrid, albeit in second person, but is sort of describing herself as hubris meets shame, or words to that effect. And I felt, what's Henry then? If she's hubris plus shame, he's kind of hubris plus what, fear of humiliation or something. And I wonder where that comes from. And that's why that links, I think, with the, not quasi, the kind of homosexuality intrigue that's set up from that first page. Is that something that has led to his humiliation in the past? There's all sorts of
I wanted to
join.
I think I discussed with you at one point whether there should be an explicit, I think there was in there an explicit encounter with a same-sex relationship in the past. But I didn't feel that he was brave enough to own up to whatever he was feeling, and I felt like that would make it less believable. Make his kind of like his weakness less believable.
I love that. I love that he feels that he can choose to or not fall in love with Astrid, but can't see that that's exactly what's happening with the handiwork. It's just
I hope. Great. I really hope that was like almost like a perfect crossover. I wanted that. Another thing about Henry is that I didn't want people to be turned off from him. So I worked very hard on keeping him human, as despicable as he can get. And some of where he reaches like the pinnacle of his weakness and his lack of self-awareness were some of the best bits to write. And I very much enjoyed keeping, so that for people who haven't read the book, that there is a party on this, that they go to Greece after Astrid falls into the fire. They go to Greece, and that she's got to recuperate, and Henry's there with her. And there's a party that they can't find on the island, but they can only hear. And I have to say, I really enjoyed keeping that party out of Henry's reach. I really loved doing that. I felt like he really didn't deserve to be there at all. And of course, everyone else wanted Astrid to be there. Everyone else loves Astrid, and effortlessly she draws people in. And the great thing about Henry is that he believes that he effortlessly draws people in, which was a great thing to be able to write.
Fantastic. And I love the island is part of what you could have won. That always slightly out of reach for him anyway, even when he gets there. So it's lovely. Right, I heard you talking a while ago when you were interviewed elsewhere, I can't remember where, about gestures, and I really love this. So about well, what I want to do is kind of link Amy Winehouse with Astrid
Yeah.
through the medium of gesture. And I wondered
Yes.
if you could talk a bit about that, please.
Yeah, I must say I can't remember. I don't know whether I've amalgamated like fantasy with reality when I think about this, but I do, I think, remember her close to the end of her life, Amy Winehouse, that is, being on stage and like hanging her gaze up to the gods, and there was her boyfriend of the time, and she there's a, I think it's from The Little Prince, that says true love comes when nothing is expected in return. And her face was just like, I don't want anything back from you. I'm absolutely yours. There's nothing you need to do. And it was that kind of like X-ray of her vulnerability and her willingness to sacrifice herself that I was at once like jealous of, but also like wanting to shake her for. And I felt like that was kind of Astrid's story. It was her ability to be absolutely vulnerable and yet and willing to sacrifice herself, and yet driven to discover who she really was. Amy Winehouse didn't have time to do that, and I think I said before that I wanted Astrid to be able to reread her past and continue. Unfortunately, that didn't happen for Amy Winehouse. But when I say that I wrote this book because I didn't want her to be dead, it's because it's from that gesture and the effect that it had on me that I got the impetus to carry on writing this in the way that it's written.
I love as well that gesture in the book is caught on film, and so it's a repeating gesture that comes to kind of haunt her, and certainly Henry. I love that, and for me that kind of linked with, you know, the moment where she pauses the box set on Adriana, who's caught between a fox and a fawn, which I remember from years ago and absolutely love as an image. But the same is true in that moment for, you know, for Astrid kind of gesturing towards Henry from the stage like she does. I just thought that little moment is lovely because she can't get away from it, and nor can he. It repeats. It's just
yes, and it's forever, and everyone can see it. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Peter Ustinov, I think it was, said comedy. We always get. I just have to explain that we always attempt to get this quote right, and we always get it wrong. And I'm going to get it right because I've written it down. Right, he said, comedy is simply a funny way of being serious. Okay.
Yeah, saying something serious, yeah.
All right. So even though I wrote it down, I got it wrong. Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there. So he said something like that. You get the gist anyway. Did you set out to make this book funny? Because I find the book very funny in obvious funny places, like Hypno Ray looking like an old woman with his coarse 2 black hair, you know, many kind of farcical moments, but also just the funny arising through the floorboards of the book. It's just there all the way through for me. So how did you go about getting the comedy in there?
I just wanted to create extremes that would push what the character intended and what they really, so the difference between their kind of action and their intention. For me, a lot of comedy is within that space. And I just wanted to push things to extremes because I feel like stories and characters that do that achieve more. I love stories. The kind of books that I like to read are those which are brave, trying to hit it out of the park, tone-wise. I don't think something needs to be incredibly solemn all the way through. I don't think you detract from the solemnity of something by making other parts funny, or even having the comedy within the solemn parts. I wanted to kind of like test really how far I could go with both, because the subject matter is it could be seen as solemn, but I didn't want the characters to not be tested in lots of different ways. So yeah, I think it's as Woody Allen says, when you're funny, it's hard not to be.
Yeah, very much so.
No, but the everything I do, I
Do it for me?
always would. I do it for you. I always want to involve comedy. I don't understand how you can't really.
Agree.
I don't feel like the story has humanity unless it's got some funny aspect to it.
Totally. I think The Sopranos is very funny, you know.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing I said that we were going to talk about and we haven't yet is structure a bit more. And I think I'll perhaps ask you about this, and then we're almost coming up to time, so we can maybe then see if anyone's got any questions. But so the structure of this novel for me is a bit reminiscent, or at least it was in the early days, to bring up Jennifer Egan again, but of Visit from the Goon Squad, which is you know, a series of a kind of interlinking short stories with elements sort of leaking between the stories, and I kind of something about that here for me. And I just wondered.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go on.
Before I forget it, Ken. When I was talking to Andrew McMillan last week, I was saying that there was something. So before, when I was saying about I wanted to keep things mobile, I also wanted to keep them open. So with the parts outwards, so that whatever it was supposed to hook onto, it would, without me having anything to do with it. So I was very aware that I wanted the shape of these things to not tessellate, but to impinge upon each other in ways that they should, in ways that were natural, and that I would not have anything to do with. And a lot of my time and devotion was spent trying not to do anything on purpose in that respect. So if they do link together, it's not by design or not by explicit design. They just happen to be touching each other where they decided to. It was more about like trying to capture the form of the thing as it came to me without crushing it. So I'd often have to like try and listen to it or feel it or just do something that meant I wasn't putting the structure on it. The structure was coming to me. I know this all sounds extremely abstract, but it was definitely about wanting to keep it open and receptive.
And I remember there was a fair amount of kind of move this here, then if you do that you have to move this here, but does that now work anymore? How has that changed everything? And you know, that is kind of, that for me is what I remember a bit of the process. You try something, but you can't just leave it there, because now that has this effect and this effect and this effect. It was a really interesting process to watch evolve, and I'm glad I wasn't the one trying to move it around.
And then you know, the upshot is always, will anyone want to continue reading? Do people understand what's happening? How many answers must you give at this point? Someone said to me a few years ago, and it was the most awful revelation, that a novel is just what happens when. Once you realize that is actually the case, your life as a novelist is over, because you can pretend piddling about doing this and that and making things happen this way and that way, that it's not all about that. And I felt like writing this book chronologically would crush the things that I wanted to be alive in it. But whether I would try and do it again in this way, I didn't try. It came to me like this. I didn't have anything to do with it. It came to me like that. So whether I'd be able to survive another novel like that, I don't know.
And partly as well, isn't it? It's what you can find in the folders where you've saved them. Because I know you and I share a love of mystery, in that we sometimes save things in folders called things like "it's this
That's
one,
you,
definitely
Ken.
not
Nothing
this,
to do with me.
ignore
Remember,
most
Ken?
of this." So
That's
yeah, it's a
you.
lovely kind of organic process of what we might.
Organic
When
process
we-
of no memory.
Yeah. Finally, and then we'll ask these questions. What are you working on next? What's next, please?
Well, I've been writing on some fragments about violent acts that have led to regret, and what that means for the lure of regret. So the possibility of being addicted to regret, and some of the regrettable events that have spurred that interest or obsession. That's one of the things I'm writing. Another thing is I'm very interested in like the neuroscience and the poetry of creative reverie. So the kind of like immersion that we need to cultivate to be able to create anything. I'm really interested in whether poetry and literature can render that experience more potently than neuroscience can, telling us exactly the mechanics of it and what happens when you bring a bit of both in. So yeah, I'm writing a couple of non-fiction things at the moment, and some fiction, but,
and
yeah,
some comedy with me,
and some comedy with you.
that was it. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you these questions that are coming up. So from Becky, Kate and Rachel, is Pick Me a book, or was that written for radio, TV? It was written for TV. It went straight to DVD. No, it didn't. Yeah, written for TV, that one. From Sarah. Rachel, how has your career transformed from neuroscientist to author and writing professor? It seems like a huge leap, but maybe there was a natural transition.
My mother died. I realized I didn't have to pretend to like that job anymore, and I could be a writer. No, it wasn't that simple. I wish it was, but that kind of is something to do with it. But I've not, all of the things that I was interested in as a neuroscientist, I am still interested in as a writer. I can't really get away from the things that used to obsess me there, followed me into writing. And I always say that I would never have gone into writing had I known it had so much to do with accuracy. I thought I could have left. I thought I could just leave that behind, but unfortunately, I didn't.
Becky, if you would like to buy Rachel's book, here we are. What you could have won. Please call Malvern. So here's how to get your hands on your copy, a copy of the book. We're open for curbside pickup or appointments for browsing. We can ship within the US. Fantastic. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask Len while she is here? Tara, yes, go for it.
So I wanted to come back to this question of second person and why I think it works really well for Astrid, because I've been musing on this and I do think it works phenomenally well. And I think partly it's because it creates a gap. You've got the you who's speaking, the you who's listening. Ostensibly, they're the same person, but there is always an implied gap between them. And when you're talking about someone who has a history of childhood sexual abuse, who has immense neediness issues, that gap is very appropriate. It does, as your Kirkus reviewer said, allow the reader to sort of slip in there and just be suspended in this person. So there's an empathy that happens, but also it creates this sense that happens over time that she's actually fueling her own sense of need, because while the gap was maybe created by forces that are beyond her, she is now continuing it, and everything she pours into that bucket that's got the hole in is just pouring right out again. And the more she does it, the weaker she feels. And it's about closing that gap and embracing that first person that becomes such a potent force, I think.
Yes, Tara, and I meant to do it every bit.
That's not a question at all, but there we go.
Yes, Tara, that feels exactly right. That feels exactly what I was trying to do.
And there's a hole in Astrid's bucket, in every sense, which it fits even more with filling it and it never being enough to be filled.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Don't think so. In that case, thank you, Len. I love that. It's so
Thanks,
nice to
Len.
talk to you. And this is the best reception we've had ever. Whenever we try and speak on the phone for the last 15 years, we've never got beyond, I'm fine, how are you? Fine, I'm fine. So this is marvelous. Thank you so much. And thank you, Becky, for hosting us this evening. It's fantastic.
Well, on
Thank
behalf
you,
of,
Malvern.
thank you all so much. Really enjoyed it. It was very enlightening, and you were the perfect moderator on this. I'm so glad, Rachel, that you picked Kate, because I think it was a wonderful, it was great to have someone who knows your work so well and who is so familiar with it, and it really offers a lot of insight to all the rest of us.
Privilege. Yeah,
it was
really was.
So on behalf of Joe, the Malvern Books owner, and myself, thank you all so much for joining us. This will be available on YouTube after we upload this video. And those of you who are in Austin, we'd love to see you at Malvern Books. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.